Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's 12:30, so I think we'll make a start. Welcome to the IMechE, the importance of brand me. My name is Rob Austin Goodall. I'll be moderating this webinar. Liz Bennett, my colleague, will be delivering it. If you haven't already, there's a chat box available by clicking on the icon Chat Now in the bottom right-hand corner. If you have any questions or have any insights or thoughts, please put them in the chat box. Liz and I will endeavour to answer them as we go along or as we get to the end. And I'll hand over to you, Liz, if you want to kick off with the agenda.
Perfect. Thanks, Rob. Let me add my warm welcome to everyone that's online with us today. Thank you so much for joining in, and thank you for the fabulous comments in the chat box. I'm kind of guessing from the range of comments there that there's a lot of interest in this topic. Maybe something to do with New Year, New Me. Who knows? Who knows? But it's great that there's so much interest in it. By brief way of introduction, you can see my photo on screen there. I'm Liz. I'm the head of consultancy here at IMechE, which means that my role is to primarily design and deliver training courses. And in that capacity, I manage the training team that many of you will be familiar with already. I work around the globe. I'm in a very fortunate position to do that. And to me, this subject of branding is one that is close to my heart, because I have found, and some of you have used this comment in the chat box, I have found the need to reinvent myself several times throughout my career. It's really interesting. The question we posed to you was, do you have a personal brand? What does personal brand mean to you? And do you have one at the moment? And, you know, it's my view that assuming that everybody online has a social media presence, then in my opinion, you already have a brand. Even those of you who have said in the chat box that you haven't really thought about it thus far, you have one if you have a social media presence. So in my mind, it's no longer a question of, do you have a brand? If you have a brand, it is, the question more is, do you control it? And do you want to cultivate it? And that is, I'm going to pick up on some of that thinking around that today. In terms of, I will define how I see a personal brand, what I think a personal brand is, and I think many of you in the chat box have already commented on that too. But for now, let me just leave you with that thought that you already have one. If I just pick one comment out the chat box, Mark Denny, it was your own. You said something like how people see you from the information that you put out on LinkedIn, social media sites, etc. I think that's spot on. So we all do have a brand. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, obviously. I'm going to start wide. I'm going to talk about generally what's a brand in the wider sense. I'm going to talk about why it's important and how we can apply this to ourselves so that I can get you all thinking about what your personal brand is. And again, it's encouraging really to see that many of you in the chat box have already been thinking about it, have recognized that you don't pay much attention to it and maybe want to pay some more attention. So hopefully this is a good platform for you to do just that. I will, throughout this session, try to pick up on as many of your comments and questions as I can, and Rob's helping me to do that. So if I don't pick up on a question, Rob will save it for me. I'm not trying to avoid it. It's just that there may be many questions and comments coming through. So keep posting in the chat box and we'll keep summarizing as much as we can the questions and the comments that we see there. So let's make a start. Well, let's make a start with what is a brand? The question that I posed you and you gave very good answers to. I guess in its simplest sense, a brand is a reason to choose. And again, several of you made that comment or a comment very similar to it in the chat box, how you frame yourself in your market. How you put yourself out there, how people see you. There were several comments around that line. So if you think of it as a reason to choose, and that's in the wider sense, it's why we choose the products that we choose. It's often why we choose the organizations that we choose to work in, because we've found a reason to do so. And that reason is often tied up in the product or the organization have worked on a carefully designed message in order to get you to choose them. That's what products do. They think, what's the message we want to give to people so that they have a reason to choose us? What experience do we want to offer people so that they have a reason to choose us? What can we do that differentiates ourselves from other products, other organizations, so that people choose us? And that's where we're going to go in this webinar. What reasons are you going to give people so that they choose you? And I mentioned the word experience there a couple of times, and I think that's a really important word that I'm going to come back to, because by experience, it's not just you're appealing to both heads and hearts. It's not just logic. That's not why you choose things, or it's not the only reason why you choose things. You choose from your head and your hearts, your logic and your feelings, and that we want to examine in the context of our personal brand too. And of course, those of you who, if you look this up in the dictionary, you'll find that a brand is also defined as a mark left on livestock, left on cattle, with a red hot branding iron. Now, I don't particularly want to go down that channel, but I think it's an important point because it is the brand leaves its mark. And I think that's a very helpful comment for us as well. What mark do you want to leave on with people so that they will choose you? Now, I said I was going to start wide and then narrow this down into our own context. So let me stick with that. We're going to start wide by looking at two very well-known brands. And they are on the screen in front of you. And you know these brands very well. They are COCA-COLA and they are Pepsi. But I want you to do a poll to give me your opinion as to why you think COCA-COLA consistently outsells Pepsi. Why do you think that is? Okay, great. I'm seeing in my messages now. I can't actually see the results. Hopefully, all of you out there can see the results. So, why do you think COCA-COLA outsells Pepsi? Well, some people said because it's cheaper. Some said it's more widely available. Some of you said it tastes better. Okay, we're talking about 20% said widely available, 20% said tastes better, and a number of you said none of the above. Okay, well, let's have a look at that for a moment then. Does it taste better? Well, of course, that's subjective, isn't it? That's subjective, of course it is. But here's the interesting thing. Consistently in taste tests, Pepsi outperforms Coke. So those of you who think Pepsi tastes better than Coke, you're not alone. Consistently in taste tests, that's how it comes out. Is it price? Some of you, not many of you admittedly, but some of you thought, well, it's cheaper. No, it's not. Generally speaking, and of course, there's always discounts, but generally speaking, Coca-Cola is more expensive than Pepsi. Yeah? So more or less the same, but generally speaking, more expensive. Is it because it's more widely available? No, it's not. Generally speaking, again, distribution worldwide is pretty similar. And in fact, in the UK, arguably, Pepsi is more available in bars and restaurants than Coca-Cola is. So, if it's not price, if it's not taste, if it's not availability, what is the answer? And of course, you've got it. What is the answer? And the answer is brand. Coca-Cola's success over Pepsi is, in brand terms, a victory for branding over all of these other things. When you buy Coke, people tend to buy into the Coca-Cola brand. And let's have a look at what that Coca-Cola brand is. Images on the screen in front of you. Be really interesting for you to tell me in the chat box. What do you think of when you think of the Coca-Cola brand? What words come to mind? Some of the images on the screen, of course, are prompting that for you. These are all real images of Coca-Cola adverts. So when you look at these, what stands out for you? Perfect. Christmas, absolutely. Happiness, it says so on the screen. Red, euphoria. What a fabulous word. It relates to people having fun, good times, carefree, happy for everybody, useful. My goodness, look at all of these words. And it's interesting because like some of you, I don't really drink Coca-Cola too. And yet we have bought into this image through their very careful messaging, through their advertising. This is what Coca-Cola want us to believe. And it is subjective. So Tegwin, if you've made a comment about bad reputation, you've got a personal story there, obviously. But I'm talking in the general sense. It is subjective, though. Other people will prefer Pepsi. It's the way it works. Okay, so thank you so much for that. Yeah, the words that come to mind spring out at us through how Coca-Cola portrays itself, as you can see on the slide there. The fun, the happiness, the inclusivity, the teamwork, it's all of that. So how does it do this? Well, here's an example of how Coca-Cola manages to tell the story that you have just interpreted for yourselves. It's because, as you recall, a moment ago, I said a brand is a carefully designed message that gives people a reason to choose. And that's what Coca-Cola have done here. And that's what we can learn from Coca-Cola. Just very quickly going through this, if you start on the right-hand side, Coca-Cola have defined their purpose, their mission, to refresh the world in mind, body and soul, to inspire moments of optimism and happiness. And that comes through, that message is consistent through their advertising, as you just seen on the previous screen. How do they want to position themselves? Their unique selling point is about having a good time. How do they do that? Through their visual design and the tone of voice that they use. As you can see, I'm going around the slide in a clockwise direction. It taps into concepts of friendship and happiness that you just identified. And it also looks at its media presence. Coca-Cola media is all over the place in terms of sponsorship, trucks, online, adverts, etc., etc., so that we experience the whole thing. It's a carefully designed message so that you end up associating Coca-Cola not just with drink, but with human qualities, if you like, through Coca-Cola having broken it down into its purpose, USP, visual design, etc. So what can we learn from that? Starting wide, beginning to narrow it down, but we're not quite ready to start talking personal branding yet. But what can we learn from Coca-Cola's example about the importance of branding? Well, we can learn this. Why is brand important? Product brand, organizational brands, your brand. Why is it important? Because it can increase value. in monetary terms, yes, but also in terms of perceived worth, the value you put on something. Brand is important because it's how people perceive you, whether you're a product, whether you're an organization, whether you are you. It's how people perceive you. It is what distinguishes you from your competitors. It's why people choose you, as we said earlier, and it can give you competitive advantage, and that can mean the difference between success and failure in a marketplace, in a crowded marketplace. And for every one of us, we are all, unless we have a very unique and specialized set of skills, every one of us works in a crowded marketplace. So branding, our branding, can help us, can make the difference between success and failure for us, just as it does with Coca-Cola. So let's stick with this for a moment, and I want to just flash up a couple of slides with you about other brands to see whether these distinguish themselves in your eyes, and if so, how. So, start with some easy ones. What brands are these? Just quickly put in the chat box. I'm sure. Yeah, Clive, thank you for your comment. Isn't it also about authenticity? For sure. And I'm going to come back to that. Great point. Yeah, Brett, you're the first one in there. Of course, Apple, British Airways and Windows. Very easily distinguishable brands. No words on them. You know them just from images. And as I've said already, of course, it's subjective. What you think of these brands is your opinion based on your experience of them. But the point that I want to make these is pretty easy. You know these brands, whatever you think of them. You know them. Let's talk about how do you experience these brands. And again, comments in the chat box if you like. I mean, there are hundreds of brand images I could put up here. The point that I'm trying to make is the previous slide, you knew them just from the icons. Here, the logos. Here they are using words as well as images. And the words are consistent with the image that they are trying to portray. So, First Direct, what is First Direct saying to you? Well, it's saying we're different. We are to banks what the platypus is to mammals. It makes you think we're different. We're not going to make it that easy. You need to really think about what we're offering because they're suggesting to you other banks are more obsolete. We're the chess piece that plays hopscotch. We think outside the box. We're different. On the other hand, Nationwide is appealing to a different type of market. We're on your side. We're collaborative. We're collegiate. We are family. We're security. We are about settling down. So two different brands and their images and their words are telling two different stories. And yes, Yoshi, I understand Nationwide as a building society. That is also positioning itself as a bank. Okay, what about these? Again, your opinions, of course, are subjective. What at the point that I want to make with them, I want you to focus on their words, their images, and how they tell their stories, because this is what we're going to use in our personal branding. So EasyJet are deliberately telling a story, whatever you say, fun, fresh, spontaneous, cheap. British Airways, the opposite, safe, secure, traditional, more comfort. This is what they offer. And as I say, we could have chosen hundreds to share with you. So what's the point? So let's just step back a moment. What's the point of this? It's to remind us that brands think carefully about how they differentiate themselves from their competitors, and then they promote themselves in their very crowded marketplaces. They promote themselves in order to be successful, and that is the key message for us all. We know why it's important. We know it's about total message. And that total message includes image. So one final thing for you to think about before we start looking at your personal branding. And it's the image part that I want you to think about now. We know some of you already said it in the chat box that your personal brand is about your unique combination of skills and experiences, the things that make you you, and how you present that to the outside world. Let's draw from product branding in order to reinforce that point. Why do you think Virgin Media asked Usain Bolt to be the face of their media campaigns? What do you think? Any thoughts in the chat box? Well known, Brett, absolutely. What else? What does you fast, speed, absolutely. Anything else? Again, it's how they want the fastest provider, worldwide, dynamic, fun, Aidan. He's a winner, Norman. All of these things. I would suggest, as well as that, Virgin wanted to convey that they're dynamic, bit cheeky, successful, fastest on the planet. These are human qualities. They chose Usain Bolt to make their brand personal. And in terms of not understanding the picture, this is taken from an advert that they actually used. Bolt is Virgin, is the image that they want to make here for the reasons that we've just talked about. What about this one? Michael Jordan. Why do you think Nike partnered up with Michael Jordan? Why did they choose him to be the image of their company? Yeah, winners pick winners, success. And the comments that you're making in the chat box are absolutely right. You've got it. They wanted both brands, if you like, the Michael Jordan brand and the Nike brand. It's about positioning themselves as best in their field, best at the trendsetters. The brands work beautifully together for that reason. And indeed, if you need any further proof of this, I've given you two examples there of very strong images, strong spokespeople for these two brands. But think of the opposite. Think of those brands who drop people like a hot brick when something goes wrong. Now, you know, Kate Moss was dropped by Chanel and Burberry years back. Wayne Rooney was dropped by COCA-COLA several years back. Ben Stokes, the cricketer, was recently dropped by New Balance because of alleged stories that got out into the marketplace. They were no longer seen as appropriate to be brand spokespeople, to be the image of the brand that they were previously employed to market. So what do we learn from this? We learn that we have to think of the image we portray because we are our own spokesperson. We can't afford a Michael Jordan. It wouldn't be appropriate. We can't afford a Usain Bolt. It wouldn't be appropriate for us. So we have to rely upon ourselves. We are our own spokesperson. Let's start narrowing it down. What can we learn from all of this that we have talked about so far and apply it to ourselves? Well, we have to design and define our compelling difference, our own story, so that we can get people to choose us. We know it's important to differentiate ourselves. We know that brands, we've seen it in the Coca-Cola one, think about their purpose, their USP, their P, their design, their voice, etc. We know that in a crowded marketplace, and I'm deliberately repeating myself, we have to do all of these things too. So everything that we have talked about so far is actually going to help us in defining and designing our own personal brand. And I've lifted from the Coca-Cola example to do that. What makes my brand, what makes your brand, is the same that makes the Coca-Cola brand and any other product brand, but applied to us. A strong personal brand is a carefully designed message that gets people to buy you. And it starts with you thinking, right now, what am I currently communicating? Again, top right-hand corner. What's my purpose? Just as we saw with the Coca-Cola one. What gets me out of bed in the morning? What does work mean to me, and why is that important? What is there about my unique skills, experiences, and talents that I can talk about that differentiates me from the next person? What is my image, my visual design, if you want to use the product branding terms? What is my image communicating right now through how I dress, how I walk, how I position myself online? How do I talk about myself, tone of voice? Do I present myself assertively or not? What's my media presence? Where am I seen? Which social sites do I use? How do I network? What platforms do I use? Why do I use them? And my challenge to all of us is to think about this right now, not to spend too long a time, just right now think, what am I saying to the outside world about me right now? Be honest. You may need some help to do this. You may have to ask a friend, how do I come across when I'm in meetings? You may have to look at your social media sites and say, if I were a recruiter in this crowded marketplace, what would these be saying about me? So it's to do a check now about what you think your message is in the outside world. And then to do it again. So the first one, the previous slide, is a relatively quick, let's not agonize too much, but let's think about what am I saying right now about me to the world. And then what do I want to be saying? So if there is a mismatch, if you think you've nailed it now, and you can go through your purpose, your USP, your visual design, and you're happy with how you are branding yourself, fine. But if you think there's work to do, put yourself forward to, in 6 months' time, what do I want my brand to be saying? And then, of course, the difference between now and 6 months is the work that you have to do. You've identified the gap, if you like. So in 6 months' time, you will have rebranded. And I'm saying 6 months, some of you may be able to achieve it in 3, but I think it can take 6 months to do some of the things that I'm going to suggest to you, you should be doing. So in 6 months' time, what do I want to be saying about myself? If I'm not sure what my purpose is now, if I'm not sure what I get out of work, what meaning of work has for me, then you know you need to put some time into thinking about it. And I've got some suggestions for that. There's so many articles and books out there to help you identify what your purpose is. If you're not sure what your USP is, what your skills, experiences, what your knowledge, how you can use those to offer you as an alternative to people, then you need to be talking to your manager, you need to be talking to your colleagues, you need to be doing an audit, a self-audit. That's going to take you a little bit of time to do that properly. If you're thinking about visual design, what do you want to communicate to people? Then you're going to have to spend some time thinking, okay, who do I admire? What can I learn from them? What messages do I want to give people? Is my dress aligned to the image that I want to be seen as? If you think back to the Usain Bolt example we showed a moment ago, it wouldn't have worked for either Usain Bolt or Virgin to have Usain Bolt dressed in a three-piece suit for that advert, to state a silly example. You've got to think carefully about how you present yourselves to your various audiences. You've got to think carefully about how do you want to represent yourself verbally, through emails, through written form, through articles, through blogs, through posts you might make in response to other people's blogs. This is all work in progress for you. And last but certainly not least, in terms of media presence, now and in 6 months' time, if you want your media presence to be working for you, you've got to think about where you want to be seen. How do you want to network? Who with? Who will you network with? What platforms are you going to use? What image do you want to convey in each of these channels? And that is going to take some time. So to summarize, previous slide, start with where you are now. Then spend more time into thinking, where do you want to be in 6 months if you're not happy with where you are now? And of course, how are you going to get there? And remember, and this is the comment about, I saw in the chat box previously about authenticity. Remember, this is about you. And in all things, you have to be authentic. Your brand, your plan will differ from the next person. And of course, it has to differ from the next person because it's about making you stand out. So let me have a quick look. I'm aware that I might have missed some comments in the chat box, but hopefully I'll pick them up later. Yeah, you can't be who you're not, Johnny. I agree. You have to think about your message, and that's so tied into your purpose. You cannot copy the next person. If somebody has a purpose to, I don't know, to climb the career ladder so that they can be the best team manager they have ever met. That's their purpose, and their communication will have to reflect that. Another person's purpose, their communication will reflect their own. You cannot copy this. And I'm deliberately not going to comment on some of the Theresa May Brexit type comments in the chat box. Though it really is an interesting point, isn't it? Once you start thinking like this, you do, it's such a good point, you do watch people on TV and think, what's their message? What are they really wanting to say to me? And is their message consistent with that? It's a fascinating topic. But okay, so what I'm suggesting to you is you need to think now, and you need to think about what it's going to be in 6 months' time. And I'm also going to suggest this to you. For those of you who are out there, and I know some of you will be thinking this, that this is a lot of work. I want you to think, what's stopping you doing it? You know it's important. You know it makes sense. What's stopping you? And we're going to present you with another poll now, another 20 seconds or so. You see some options there. Let me know what you think. What, if anything, is stopping you? Okay, so what's stopping you? You haven't got the time for a number of you. Too much effort for some people. It's not relevant to me. Okay, there are still some of you I haven't convinced. Okay, I don't see any other comments. So, okay, let me have a look in the chat box. So if you think a number of you, nothing is stopping you. Any other comments in the chat box that I might have missed in? Okay, it's a confidence issue. All right, John, thank you. Prioritization of self over other work. Philippa, nobody else is going to do it if you don't. Motivation. It can be difficult to be objective about your own skills and self. Yeah, David, as you can see, I'm just skimming some of the comments here because there are so many of them. Thank you for that. It can be difficult. Talk to other people, people that you trust. Oh my goodness, Scott, if you have a poor manager who effectively sabotages your personal brand, Rob, remind me of that one. I want to come back to that. I'm just careful that I need to answer as many comments as I can without getting sidetracked by one of them that is such a good comment. How do you define the line between being a show-off and presenting yourself out there? It's how you position it, I think, Martin. Most of us know the difference between somebody who is being arrogant and somebody who is genuinely presenting their brand. It's about that authenticity again. Oh, goodness. It is so many good comments here. Okay, let me see if some of my other slides will help with some of those comments. If not, I feel the need that this session could go on for much longer than an hour. But keep them coming and somehow I will respond to as many of those as I can. Okay. I know that these things are genuine, which is why I have asked the question now, because I'm not done yet with the information I want to share with you. But I wanted to acknowledge that some of you are already thinking, I can't do all of this because I haven't got the time, I haven't got the motivation, I haven't got the confidence. So now what I'm going to do with you is, first of all, let me just recap. I'm saying we can learn from product branding. We can learn that it's about purpose, identifying, doing yourself the favor, giving yourself the gift of creating some time for you to think about these things. What's the meaning of work for me? What do I want to get out of it? What are my skills and experiences? What else do I need to learn? How can I present myself to others? As I've just said, it's about giving yourself the gift of time to do that. And one thing that might help you is actually reframe how you're thinking about this. So whilst I am suggesting to you that you approach it in the same way as what we've learned from COCA-COLA, how they approach it, so that you can get the right message about you, if you weave it into your approach to your own career planning, some of you may find that more helpful. So don't look upon creating your personal brand as an extra job. Make it part of, the next 6 months, make it part of your own performance management process. This time of year is often the appraisal time for a lot of organizations, and maybe you'll find it helpful if you weave this discussion about branding into your own career planning. And how you would do that is, as the slide suggests, again, starting at the top right-hand side. Do a self-assessment. Do think of your brand, your purpose, your values, as we have talked about. If some of you have said it's difficult to be objective, talk to others. Do your own 360. If your own company does a 360, ask if it can be used for you. But if you don't have a formal 360 or you don't have access to one, then do your own. Talk to your manager if they are a supportive manager. Talk to your project team. Talk to your project manager. Talk to your colleagues. Those of you who have direct reports, talk to them. Talk to them one-on-one. Talk to them in groups if you have that, over lunch, after meetings. Take every opportunity to inform your thinking to help you do this self-assessment. Then, as part of your career planning, think, as this slide suggests, think of your presence. What jobs, sectors are of interest to you? What about other parts of your organization? Are they of interest? Think about what your current skills are. where you want to go to in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, what skills and experiences do you need. This is real career planning work. This is not just profiling work, it's real career planning. Look at right now, what's your social media presence? Do you use LinkedIn, or are you just, are you there but you never use it? What other social media sites are you on? What do they say about you? Look at if you use Facebook, if you use Twitter, if you use Google+. How are you using them? Are they just for social, or are they for possible work connections too? And when you've done that self-assessment and you've decided what's important to you, think, okay, how can I put this into action? And the point there is, don't make this another elephant to eat, another major task. Think about 10 minutes a day to sell yourself. That's what you're doing. Just take 10 minutes each day to do one of these tasks. And as one of you said so rightly in the chat box, regard this as a continuous process, which is why thinking about your personal branding and working on it as part of your career planning approach reinforces that this is continuous. Yes, the webinar was introduced as, if you're at the beginning of your career, but whoever it was who said it in the chat box, forgive me, I've forgotten, it is continuous. You have to do this throughout your career. You have to make this as part of your career plan, an ongoing approach, because throughout your career, throughout your life, your purpose, your priorities, your options will change. And it's about you authentically deciding what you need to do with them. So I strongly recommend that you build this into your career plan. Just as other famous brands, product brands, come and go and change over the years, so will you. You must do this continuously if you're going to keep your brand and your career plan up to date. So I'm deliberately weaving career planning and branding into one now, so that you don't think of this as a too big a job to do. Okay, before I move on, let's have another quick scan at some of the comments in the chat box. Alaminu, your surroundings will influence you too if you have nobody in direct vicinity. Yeah. Okay, I think I might have missed what that was in connection with. Yeah, Andrew, focus on your current situation. Notice how you may want to change. Yeah, absolutely. Chris, another issue I have is consistency in approach, motivation, and desired outcome. Chris, without knowing the context for that, I find it difficult to answer personal issues. However, what I can suggest there is just step back. Often we will help ourselves by talking to other people. Think of people who you work with. Maybe they're colleagues, maybe they're managers, maybe they are people who work for you. And if you think they have a good, strong personal brand that you admire, talk to them. Has it just evolved for them, or have they put time and effort into it? In terms of motivation, motivation is about the desire to do something. I can't give you the motivation, but all I can do, and Chris, this is not just addressed at you, this is everybody who made that comment, is no one else is going to do this for you. So if it's important to you, and I hope I've established that at least it should be, because we all work in crowded marketplaces. If it's about getting started, I'm going to give you some specific smaller tips in a moment. The motivation is, if you want to differentiate yourself, if you want to succeed, remember the Coke and Pepsi challenge. Success comes as a result of differentiating yourself so that you give people a reason to choose you. Okay, let me move on. So think of yourself in terms of that purpose, USP, your visual design, how you communicate, your media presence. In other words, how you come across to people in the widest possible way. Weave it into your career planning for the best results. And right now, from now on, this is my challenge to you, if you like. From now on, start thinking of yourself as a brand. If you get into that mindset, that might be the first step on the path for you. So start thinking of yourself as a brand now. And for those of you who are worried that maybe this will come across as arrogant, start thinking of yourself as a brand that is not arrogant, a brand that through your communication shows genuine cooperation, collaboration, team spirit. And of course, if you think of yourself as a collaborative person, a team person, if you think of yourself as a sympathetic, supportive person, then you have to make sure that all of your communications supports that, just as we saw with the product brand. So this is about being aligned. Think of how you want to be and then make sure that's how you come across. So right from now, do an audit of your online presence. If you do nothing else, do that. Where are you online? Why are you there? And what's the message saying? Do you use all the brands or the online presence that you can do? You know, is it just LinkedIn, or do you use Google Plus? Do you use Instagram? Do you use Twitter? And why and how? From now on, do a Google search for the top influencers in your industry. So if you identified that you want to stay in your industry or in your sector, or if you identified that you want to cross-sector, you want to move to another one, do a Google search of who the top influencers are and make contact with them. So if they blog, wherever they post socially, whichever media sites they use, follow them, comment upon some of the comments they make. And, okay, you may be one of 100 or hundreds of followers, but that starts getting your profile built up. Connect, for whichever sector you're in, connect with relevant publications and forums. And contribute to them. Now, I know that this is going to take up a little bit of time, but you know you're online anyhow. And you're often online just for social purposes, and there's nothing wrong with that. What I'm saying, though, is take some of that time that you spend online and use it for this end. So make comments on other people's posts on online forums and in relevant publications. Maybe you can put a thought piece out there, and often a thought piece is just a few sentences to get a conversation going, but again, it gets your name known. And of course, as well as these slides, look at the many resources available to you. And I've recommended just two there. There are others. You can Google personal branding and you will not be short of material. Reinventing You, book by Dory Clark, very helpful in the steps to how to reinvent yourself. The Complete Guide to Building Your Personal Brand, you'll find that as online articles from Patel and Agius. So they're just two suggestions from me that might get you started in this. Okay. One final thought before I summarise, and then we'll have a look at some of the comments and questions. One final thought is from Dale Carnegie. Some of you may be familiar with his work. Dale Carnegie was an American writer and lecturer, developer of famous courses in self-improvement, salesmanship, interpersonal skills, public speaking, all manner of things. And I've always liked this quote from Dale Carnegie. It's to be interesting, be interested. And I think that helps us with the authenticity as well. Because what I'm saying, without a doubt, what I'm saying is personal branding is about knowing you, how you want to come across to people, and genuinely connecting and building relationships with them. And that begins and maintains itself through being interested in them. And again, back to the person who said, the comment rather, about being arrogant. If you're interested in people, you will reduce, in fact, I would say you'd eliminate. If you're genuinely interested, you will not come across with arrogance. And being genuinely interested in other people makes you interesting to them. And that's, in my opinion, is one of the nicest definitions I've ever come across about networking. Those of us who still roll our eyes and groan when we hear that word networking, think of it as being interested in people and showing that interest. And you'll be helping yourselves at the same time. So, just by way of summary then, a lot of information we've drawn significantly from the world of marketing, if you like, certainly from the world of product branding, because we've learned from them that a brand is a reason to choose. You do it daily in your personal lives, and we want other people to have reasons to choose us at work and in our personal lives. Why is it important? Well, because one brand can outsell another brand just because that brand is stronger. And that's the same for us. Our personal brand can be the difference between you, me, and someone with similar skills and experience to us. Your personal brand can be the difference between being chosen for a new role or a promotion. So anybody out there who is thinking they want at some stage to move into a new role or be promoted or move organizations, this actually is a no-brainer. It's about creating the time for it. And what does that time involve? Well, think about your personal brand and review it often. Think about the things we've looked at there: purpose, USP, how you come across in terms of how you present yourself visually and through communication, and your media online presence. It's as simple and as challenging as that. Remember, right now, if some of that feels too much for you, that there are things that you can do, short steps that you can take to get started on this, and I wish you the very best of luck with it. Now, Rob, I'll pass back to you, and hopefully we'll have a couple of minutes to look at some final comments and questions. Back to you, Rob.
Hi, Liz. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Thanks.
Excellent. There's a couple of questions that I've written down. Well, there's three or four, but they come under sort of two main sort of categories. Right at the start, Jake and Chris asks, how are you able to reinvent yourself within the same company where you have the inertia of your colleagues who may prevent you from moving on? And I think that echoes what Scott said just a while ago. If you have a poor manager who effectively sabotages your personal brand to others, so you are not aware.
Gosh, these are really tough questions. They're great questions. How would I do that? I think you have to find different audiences. So if you have colleagues or a manager, oh my goodness, it breaks my heart to hear that. But if you have colleagues or a manager who somehow are sabotaging your attempts, you need to work round them. You can't go through them because that will be too much of a battle, I think. I think that's the inference in the comments anyhow. So you have to work around them. You have to find stakeholders who you can present a brand to. Maybe it's your manager's manager, maybe it's another project team, maybe it is volunteering for work outside your immediate role, cross-functional projects, HR projects, to give yourself the opportunity to present your brand there without interference from these saboteurs. It sounds a dreadful situation, and if you can't do that, I'm going to have to leave people with the million-dollar question. If you cannot do this, are you in the right company? Because these people could be so detrimental to your career unless you can find a way around them. It feels an inadequate answer, Rob, but it's the best I can give at the moment.
I think that's correct, Liz. I think you've done an ample job of doing that. The next one really is, again, the 3 or 4 people have asked this, it's all about sort of, I'm not on social media. Is that a disadvantage? Or can you have a brand without being online in any way, shape or form?
Do you know, I wished I could say it's not a disadvantage, but truthfully it is. So rethink about this. If you're not on social media for social purposes, fine, I have no issue with that. But I really think every one of us, whatever our position, whatever our age, wherever we are in our career, has to have an online presence these days, because that's where people start to find out things about you. Your reputation in the company is no longer enough. You're relying upon other people to promote you, in inverted commas. You've got to self-promote without arrogance.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Liz. And that's the sort of questions I picked up on. Before everyone sort of goes, I know we're pretty much at the end of the session now. Just to remind you that there is our next webinar is the 29th of March at the same time, 12:30 to 1:30, an introduction to rail industry hazards, as you can see on the slide. Also moving along to the next slide. Here are some of our upcoming training programs, and I know there's a couple of comments within the chat box about looking at engaging us to do some training or some help about branding, about other stuff. Here's some of our public programs that are coming up, as you can see on the screen there. We also do some in-company, so if you've got a project or you've got a requirement that you have a number of your colleagues that wish to put through, then we can be more than happy to do sessions on site. Any questions? I think we've answered that. So all I've got to say is a very big thank you for everyone that's attended today. Excellent. We had an excellent turnout, a lot of great comments and chats, and hopefully we'll see you on the next webinar.
Thanks from me too, Rob. Thanks, everyone.